Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Annalisa and this is going to be my November half wrap up. I was planning on reading Indigenous books and Palestinian books this month, and that's pretty much what I've done so far. Let's start with the Palestinian authored books. Then one is about Palestine by a non-Palestinian, and then a couple of Indigenous Turtle Islanders picture books. So first we have Farah Rocks 5th Grade by a Palestinian American, and it is about Farah, who wants to get into a prestigious academy for next year. So I guess it would be a fancy middle school if she's in 5th grade now. That is like famous for its STEM programs. A problem is a new bully has shown up to school who just moved to town, and she starts to particularly pick on disabled kids, and one of said disabled kids is Farah's brother. So she tries to tell a couple of adults about it at first, but all of them say it's not a big deal. Is this very common because teachers are also ableist and think there's nothing wrong with children being ableist? Yes. Similar for other types of bigotry that form into bullying, and then the adults actually reinforce it because they are also full of bigotry. Farah decides that she needs to stick around in the same school her brother is currently in next year so she can defend him from this bully. Not that she's doing that great of a job of it, but that's in current day, but that's her idea. So she starts to tank her grades so that she won't make it into the elite academy, and she'll stay in this school with her brother. This leads to a lot of difficulties with her family and her friends and her teachers, and so it's about figuring out how to communicate with the adults and make sure that they actually listen to her. It's about communicating with her family and figuring out that she doesn't need to be another parent for her little brother, and it's about communicating better with her school friend, explaining why their feelings are hurt and figuring out how to forgive and move on from difficulties. It does include the bully having a bad backstory where her parents are getting divorced, but I appreciated that it really didn't use that to justify her behavior. It was more like a reason without being a justification. So I liked how that was handled. Oh, her family is also in debt because and her parents are having to work a lot because they bought a fancy window for their Eastern Orthodox church on a loan because as a sort of gesture that they were grateful that their son, her brother, survived because he was very ill as a child. Which I don't actually know if that's like a thing that happens a lot in Eastern Orthodox Christianity, if you like make gestures to the church as a expression of gratitude to God for doing something, because I am like 2 splits away from that tradition, 2 or probably 3. But yeah, that was very interesting to see as well. Her family is Palestinian American, and a fair number of Palestinians are Eastern Orthodox Christians. Speaking of which, the main character in Something More, which is about a Canadian Palestinian family, also Eastern Orthodox Christian. So she goes to a Catholic school because like they vibe with a lot of the same like wearing covery up type uniforms and having prayer times, and I actually know very little about Catholic school, except that I wouldn't want to go there. But yeah, this is a lot about the main character having been diagnosed with autism like a month or so before the story starts. So she's going to a new school year, finally knowing what's up with her and trying to figure out how to use the knowledge of who she is to like figure out better coping mechanisms for the new year. A lot of which just involve masking and not as much making accommodations for herself, But that is understandable because her therapist is trash, like many therapists who try to help people with autism. She's like, let's teach you to mask better. Let's not, you know, make your environment more autistic friendly. No, we'll teach you how to grin and bear it. That'll be better. And yeah, she doesn't like have access to an online community. She doesn't even have a phone. Yeah, it's understandable that while she herself doesn't have too bad of internalized ableism, she doesn't like have any resources to help her figure out how to accommodate herself. It's also a lot about romance and her having her first romance and how it's a big mess because she's at high school and high schoolers tend to be jerks to each other because their brains are all screwy. And when you put a bunch of people who are fragile like that together and make other fragile people their main source of like social support, and they don't have like good support at home, like it makes sense that they would all go around hurting each other, you know? In this particular case, she is figuring out some new friendships. She stumbles upon some pretty great friends. She also stumbles upon an absolute butthead of a boy that she likes, because she likes his aesthetic. Sorry, but that's pretty much what she likes about him, and she gets all these fuzzy feelings, and it's very frustrating because she can't see past these fuzzy feelings to see that he's a massive jerk. However, as someone who was homeschooled but had a couple of crushes on kids from youth group as a high schooler, if any of the boys I had crushes on had ever shown me the tiniest modicum of attention, I probably would have been just as ridiculous and illogical as this main character is, because she does get shown some attention from the boy she likes. Fortunately, the way my social anxiety manifested meant that I avoided notice at all costs. So my point is that while it is very frustrating to watch a teenage character, specifically she's 15, let someone tromp all over them, it is also super realistic, especially for an autistic girl who sometimes has trouble realizing that other people aren't genuine or generally navigating social situations. Although this book also shows that there are a lot of neurotypical young people who will also let themselves be trod upon. It's just something that happens to teenagers because they are so desperate to have these relationships. You might have noticed there are 2 boys on the cover. That's because there is another boy who is wonderful and reminds me a lot of some of my characters that I've made up, and is basically my taste in men, and like was my taste in young people when I was young. So I did really enjoy his character. The author, his own voice, is autistic. Yeah, I think it was quite well done. Oh, one thing that I noted that was more present at the beginning of the book was she's the youngest in her family of 3 kids, and she complains about her older sister, the middle child, having middle child syndrome, where she remembers everything and insists on everything being fair. Which reminded me of myself. I am a middle child, and I do insist that yes, if you did something for my brother when he was this age, you're going to do the same thing for me when I'm that age, or when I accomplish this milestone, I get the I get the same thing. And fortunately, although my parents didn't automatically do those things when I reached the same milestone as my brother, once I brought it up and was pushy about it, they did end up getting me, in one particular case, an ice cream cake, the same as they got from my brother. So yes, we do remember everything, and fortunately, in my family, my mother does not find he's a boy to be an adequate excuse to treat him different, which is not true in her family. That would have absolutely made me pull my hair out. So I'm really glad I didn't have to put up with that, like this character and her sister do. So yeah, that was just a funny thing that I noticed. 5 stars, and 4 stars to Pharaoh Rocks. Then we have These Olive Trees by Aya Ghanameh, who is a Palestinian illustrator, writer, and designer from Jordan. And this is about a picture book about a young girl who lives in a Palestinian refugee camp, and her family is able to grow olive trees there. And they're fairly old olive trees because they are still in Palestine, so olive trees have been growing there for a long while. And they harvest them, and it talks about all the things they make out of the olives and the branches of the olive trees. And it talks about their families playing together and working together. And it ends with them having to move and leave behind their olive trees for a place that doesn't have olive trees. And the author's note at the back talks about how Israelis, after pushing Palestinians off their land, would cut down the olive trees. I think it's a great way to explain what's going on to children. Then we have 2 books by Diana Quincy, whose grandparents were Palestinian. She writes historical romance featuring Palestinians who had a fair presence in the UK during the 1800s. I don't know which decade of the 1800s this is set in, like the first half, I think. There was a lot of textile exports and like trade between the UK and the Arab world, and so a lot of Arabic people moved to the UK to have trading houses. So we have a descendant of one of these merchants whose mother married into Marques's family, who is now falling in love with the Duke. Specifically, she stays in the same inn as him, and they have a rendezvous there on a rainy night, and then the next day they discover that he is actually supposed to be becoming engaged to her stepdaughter, who is like only 9 years younger than her. And so it's very awkward and very dramatic. Like, the title is Her Night with the Duke. I'm not gonna steal you from my stepdaughter, but also you're kind of a jerk, so I don't really think you're good enough for my stepdaughter. Yeah, it proceeds from there, and I really like the way that it went. I liked how various obstacles were thrown up in their way. I really like the characterization of the heroine. She is an author and a traveler who's a travel writer. And I liked the development of her relationship with her stepdaughter and her relationship with her Arabic family, and all of her characterization was really cool. I felt like, in comparison, the hero was a bit flat, so I didn't care as much about their romance. There were things that I liked about them together, but he was a bit annoying, and I didn't think his hang-ups about the relationship really made that much sense, but ultimately it was pretty good, so I gave it 3 stars. Then the next book I liked quite a bit better. I gave it 4 stars, is The Viscount Made Me Do It, and this is about a bone setter who is a cousin of the heroine from the last book, who is middle class. And so bone setters were usually Arabic people who knew how to fix dislocations, a bit chiropractor-ish, but also like nowadays an average doctor who's not a chiropractor can fix your dislocated shoulder, but back then white English doctors could not. They hadn't like made a study of how to do that, but bone setters could do that, and that's like how they made their way, was they did what the white doctors could not, and pretty much that's the whole medicine that they practiced, was resetting bones, and of course also more chiropractor type stuff of messing with the spine. As someone whose ribs subluxate fairly often, I really appreciate a chiropractor. So that whole exploration of that was really interesting. of course, she's also a woman bone setter, so things are a little more difficult for her because of that. Her family isn't totally supportive. They'd rather she got married, specifically to an Arab man, which is in a contrast to some historical romances where one of them is middle class and one of them is gentry. Not only do the gentry tend to stick to gentry, but the Arabic people tend to want to marry other Arabic people. So they also, just because you're a Viscount doesn't mean you can marry into our family. So I like that too, and I really liked her interactions with her family. And in this case, I thought the hero had a bit more characterization, and his issues made sense. What added drama to this one was a mystery of who had killed his parents, which, when I explained to my mom the motivation for the killer killing his parents, she was like, that's not a very good motivation. It doesn't make that much sense. While it was used to explore various issues that happened in the day, it also wasn't the best motivation for murder. So I also guessed it right away. Not because of any evidence, but because of the person's place in the story, which I don't really mind. I think it's kind of fun, and it kind of makes the rest of it relaxing because I don't have to try to solve the mystery alongside the characters. So yeah, the mystery element wasn't totally great, but it was a good excuse for them to get together to investigate it. And yeah, I ultimately really liked both characters and also liked them as a couple. So that's why I ended up giving it 4 stars. Then we have Except for Palestine, The Limits of Progressive Politics, which is basically a walkthrough of how progressive politicians in the US have been totally into imperialism, especially when it comes to Palestine, but we know they're into imperialism, period. And how they continuously make excuses for Israel's horrible behavior and the various laws that have been passed, and how everything that's happening today with Genocide Joe totally makes sense, specifically with his background, but also with like all the background of all the presidents and senators who have like led up to policy in current day. Like, nothing that's happening right now is surprising. So I found that fairly useful because I don't know a lot of the history of US policy on Palestine. So that was interesting. There were several things where it was like they reference things that they didn't like give it background or explanation for, so I felt a little bit more context in those areas would have been useful. But overall, I know a fair amount more now than I did before I read the book, so I found it useful, so I gave it 4 stars. Then I read a couple of picture books. This one is a picture book version of the book Fatty Legs, which I read a year or 2 ago, by Christy Jordan Fenton and Margaret Pogiak Fenton from British Columbia. And so yeah, I found this and the other book I'm going to mention on a post about how to teach younger kids about residential schools without traumatizing them. This one is more dark and detailed than the other one. Yeah, it explains that things were bad, but it doesn't get into just how horrible residential schools could be. I give it 5 stars. And We Were Alone by David A. Robertson and Julie Flatt is about a granddaughter asking her grandmother why she does certain things certain ways, and the grandmother tells about how she wasn't allowed to do those things when she was in a residential school, but when she was alone with the other children, she resisted and did those things anyway. And so that is a really beautiful story, and once again touches on the fact that it was really bad, but doesn't get into the details that might be traumatizing for a young child to learn about. 5 stars once again. So those are the books I read in the first half of November. I'd love to know what you've been reading. A brief update on Palestine. The Al-Shifa Hospital, the largest hospital in Gaza, was surrounded by ground forces a few days ago. The ground forces moved in. As far as I know, there was no massacre at that time. The doctors were forced out, and at least 3 premature babies died before they could be successfully transferred to another hospital, but a fair number of the babies, I think 20 of them, were successfully transferred and are currently on life support in another hospital where they are crammed together on beds with oxygen cannulas instead of being inside a incubator, as is procedure. And the death toll is now over 11,000. Free Palestine. Links below.